I've been handling animals in laboratories, animal experimentation for the past 2 years. I used to work with FIAPO. So they gave me a brief to be as simple as possible. This is as simple as it gets. If you have any doubts, feel free to ask. My boss, Jayasimha, is going to handle a part of my presentation, so I'll let you discuss that. Currently, I'm a productivity campaign manager. I'm not talking about productivity, and I would need you to take your phones out and do a missed call to this number later, not now, but just be ready. So, what is animal testing? Animal testing is any procedure that is performed on living animals, either for disease assessment, testing of new medical products, finding out symptoms of disease, or anything which, or finding out safety of various products such as cosmetics, drugs, etc. Now, animal experimentation can basically be divided into 3 parts: that's education, animals used in education, regulatory, and basic research. Now, education is something we've all done, we've all are. Some of our children have done. Okay. So I'm going to go into detail in all of this, but first with education. Education can be divided into 2 parts. One is fundamental biology and skill enhancement. Fundamental biology is to study and research the organism, the kind of organism that the frog or the rat is. What are the different parts of the body, what it does, what are its functions. So, in life sciences such as zoology, we do dissection. In schools, I've done cockroach dissection, many of us have done frog dissection, just to see the parts of the body. And skill enhancement is something which usually surgeons do, either veterinary or human surgeons. They stitch up things to practice their social abilities. They do some, they give some stimuli and see the response, how the muscle behaves, etc. Now, the Wildlife Protection Act has protected the genus Rana, which is the Indian frog, and hence catching Indian frogs and dissecting them is not permitted. Now, this is one picture I have taken when I was at FIAPO, and this just talks about how animals used in education is just such a waste of time. Because this animal, this rat, was kept in a half-full bucket of water so that he could develop ulcers, and for 3 hours, so that a group of 20 people, including me, would watch him being dissected, and then thrown into this packet in that packet. So, is animal experimentation in education really necessary? Not at all. But we're talking about not necessary. So what are the alternatives? Today technology has developed so much that models and mannequins and mechanical simulators are available, which give you those similar responses that humans would do, and they have prefix settings in them. Then we have the CompuFrog, which has been developed by so many, MGVC for instance, people from Chennai, and their collaborators. And if animals have to be used, then you can obviously get it from animal-friendly and ethical sources, such as which have already been euthanized, or from ethically sourced characters. But there have been positive developments in education. So, animal usage in education has been a successful story in India. So, University Grants Commission in New Delhi last year in November issued guidelines for discontinuation of dissection and any sort of animal experimentation in a phased manner. This includes zoology, life sciences. Now, in addition to this, the Ministry of Environment and Forest banned animal use in undergraduate colleges and university on the basis of the UNESCO ban, and issued notifications to medical colleges, pharmacy colleges, and life sciences colleges. Now let's go into basic research. Basic research is something that scientists do their entire lives. They ask the scientists, oh, I'm a biology scientist, what are you trying to do? I'm trying to do this. Ask them 5 years later, they do the same thing. Ask them 10 years later, maybe they're doing the same thing. They're either trying to discover a product, be it cosmetics, drugs. They're trying to discover what the disease's symptoms are maybe they're trying to discover how to test that, how to find out diagnostic devices, and how to find out diagnostic tests for the disease. Now, basic research does not really have any regulation except that of CPCSA, and that is something that Jayasimha is going to handle, so I'll leave it up. Regulatory analyze generation. This is my favorite part because I've worked on this because of its great potential to completely replace animal testing. So regulatory can be divided into, like now regulatory is something that the government mandates by law for animal testing to be done. So you cannot get away with this. The government, some regulatory bodies demand that you test on these certain amount of tests, and only then will they pass your product. So regulatory can be divided into the following: drugs and as so regulatory can be divided into drugs and vaccines, genetically modified crops, cosmetics, food and food products, medical devices, pesticides and other industrial chemicals.
Sorry, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
The lady that spoke this morning on the big stage, I'm sure that she said that cosmetics in India are not required to be tested on animals. Is that?
I'm going to get to that.
Are they?
Yeah.
But you're saying that they aren't required
Yeah.
to be? Okay.
Yeah.
And so they are?
Yeah.
Okay.
So now why regulatory toxicity testing? Just look at these animals. One is half fallen down, one is almost all free, unconscious, and the other has such a great consciousness. These animals are tested for chemicals, which are required by the Indian law to be performed. For example, pesticide testing. Now, the HSI has done a lot of work in regulatory testing inside and outside India. Now, pesticide testing is one of our focuses because it uses the maximum number of animals in any of the previous products that I mentioned. And Indian regulation, the pesticide, the Central Insecticides Board and the registration committee, they gives out data for safety testing. And this is as old as 1977. So imagine the kind of obsolete tests that are required to be tested. Now the world is moving ahead. European Union and this organization for economic cooperative development, OECD, is moving ahead and cutting down on animal tests. But India is nicely sitting and saying that, oh, something that we've said in 1977 still applies today. But on the right side, there is a new regulation review which has been due for 3 years now, and FIAPO and HSI together have submitted and recommended new guidelines and proposals to replace and reduce and replace animal testing. But India being India, it's been delayed, so it was supposed to be out in March, now we're in July, now September, now next. Okay, so success in pesticide testing, HSI outside India, we have been able to reduce at least approximately 40% of animal usage in pesticides. This is what I was talking about, the HSI in India, where FIAPO and HSI had a partnership and we worked to submit recommendations to the Central Insecticide Board and Registration Committee. Now, our next thing is cosmetic testing. We all know about the tests, we all know about the shampoos that are written on the rabbit's eyes, we all know about the toothpaste and the lipstick that are rubbed across a rat's mouth. But I think so many organizations doing something, but nothing really has happened till now. But we are here. So B23 is our campaign. It's the largest ever global campaign to end cosmetic testing on animals. So you can go to this page, which is www.hsi.org/B23, or just pick up the phones right now. Give a missed call. Pick up the phones.
I already been yesterday.
And give a missed call to 080-4931-1223. Now, coming to already been tested. Okay, but these mostly require testing on finished products. There's nothing on ingredients as of now. And suppose I am making a product which has a new ingredient, I have to test on that. So we are trying to get a ban on both ingredients, finished products, sale, marketing, just like the EU has.
I have a question. What she spoke on stage was this petition is to stop animal testing for cosmetics since it's not life-threatening. On that was first answer, and that's what the petition was.
Yeah.
Since this is not life-threatening, let's spare the
Yeah, and in Europe and UK, the animal testing on cosmetics has been banned since 1998 and 2009. So if Europe can do it, why are we doing it? And India does not really carry out animal testing because we don't really produce new cosmetics, but because we have cheaper labor costs and cheaper laboratories, a lot of foreign companies come and give their contracts out to our country so that we
how
can
exactly are you going to validate? I mean, if you're bringing, like you said, if you're bringing out a new product, I mean, how exactly are you, probably use the other regulatory models that
in the EU, in India, whatever tests that we have, most of them have alternatives which have been validated by the validating agency. Except one test which is now going to be, whose alternative is going to be present due in 2013.
but they're just going the easy way out by, testing on animals.
Yeah, exactly. Also, there are 30,000 chemicals in the market, and you can do any type of combination and produce a cosmetic. You don't really have to bring a new product with it. Okay, now we're going on talking about banning cosmetic testing, banning animal testing, on this and that. But where does it start and what we really want to do? Russell and Birch in 1959 gave these 3R principles of reduce, refine and replace. And then we moved on to in vitro testing, which is cell line testing in the lab, not on the animals. Then we moved on to validation, like we said. And there are so many validation agencies in Europe, in America, in Japan and Korea. But now we have moved on to toxicity testing in the 21st century. Now the National Academy of Sciences in 2007 came up with a visionary report called the 21st Toxicity Testing in the 21st Century. Now, it gives a vision and a strategy of using human cells and human relevant cells to find out toxicity tests, to find out safety. So it's very human based. If I have a problem, my lungs, how will my lungs relate to the drug, not how a rat's lung or a mouse or a monkey's lung. This has also been tested, like in the Gulf oil spill that happened. Now, if I wanted to know that how much activity impact is the Gulf oil spill going to have, and the EPA, the Environment Protection Agency of the US, they tested using these concepts which have been here, and they tested everything in 6 weeks. And if we were testing on animals, it would take 6 years. So imagine how fast it is. Of course, there is initial funding that is required to be used, but once it has been set up, it will be very cheap. And the best part is, the indirect thing is that fewer or no animals are used. So this is what we do in Human Society International, where we are trying to create a world without brain and science from something. And now this one we're going to talk about the Indian laws that regulate animal testing.
So, thank you. So, while I will give you this broader view of what's happening in the field of animal testing, what groups like Human Society and what FIAPO is doing in animal testing, there are a few things like And I think when you come for a workshop like this, you want to know what can I do better? As in, this is great that you're working with scientists, this is great that you're working with people who validate, you're working with regulators. All that is fine. Maybe I could give a missed call. Yes, I have done that. Maybe I could write a few letters, I could ask friends not to write possible interest on animals. But obviously, I want to be involved a little more than just that. And what I'm going to do today is really try and see how to use various legislations to help lab animals. As in, not just taking to the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, which is obvious, are we able to innovatively look at various legislations that are there in this country, understand what those legislations are, and how can we involve those legislations, how can we take provisions of those legislations so that we are able to help protect the lives of many other lab animals. So this is how my session will go. I'll quickly go through some of the provisions, make you understand what the law is. After that, we're going to break into small groups, and each one of you will get a problem. It says that somebody has come to you with this particular issue, so you will basically have to understand how you will do it, what you will do, whom you will contact, which laws based on what we have said, what we will do. Is there even a law at all? Will we ask for a new law? So basically, what we're going to do is transform you into real life situations and make you understand what is required and what you can do. Start thinking like an activist so that you're able to bring in the much wanted relief in the lives of animals. So to start with, what are the laws that you can basically use? Of course, the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act 1960. It's but obvious that you can use this particular act. There's an entire chapter dedicated on animal experimentation. There are multiple rules framed in the Act for animal experimentation. The CPC-SCA in itself is a statutory body. They give out a lot of regulation, and you can of course use those regulations. So this is but obvious. But what about the Indian Penal Code? You say IPC के धारा में इनको जेल देना चाहिए. So sometimes we hear in English interview. Are we able to use that magic wand of IPC and say so that we are able to use this for lab animals? As this is something that we can definitely do. What about the Wildlife Protection Act? The Alokparna in her presentation did talk a little bit about Wildlife Protection Act. Are we able to bring in provisions of the Wildlife Protection Act? For example, the Wildlife Protection Act in comparison to the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act is a way stronger legislation. Under the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, the maximum punishment is 50 rupees. So even if I take a rat or a mice or a rabbit or even a beagle, split it open without anesthesia and say, hey, you did it, and say, yes, I did it, here's 50 rupees, thank you so much. Let me continue with the business. What do you do then? Are we just going to be honest and say, well, 50 rupees is already heard, and 50 rupees is definitely not acting as a dividend? While we work to amend the PCA Act to increase the penalty, can we use the provisions of the Wildlife Protection Act, which of course most of the offences are permissible, has extremely strong legislation in comparison to anything else? What about municipal laws? You obviously have municipal laws. Half the time we are fighting with municipalities. Are we able to interpret those particular municipal laws to make it applicable for animals in labs, and how do we do? And there are of course laws with regard to import and export, there's foreign trade regulations, there's the Director General of Foreign Trade, there's the Department of Customs. Are we able to work with each one of these people, understand what their legislation is, what their regulations are, and basically interpret those regulations to make it beneficial for animals and experimentation? Yeah.
If I'm not wrong, you're the person who said it in the previous presentation, it's about action. So do you think the problem is about the implementation of these legislation, or rather just activists being paid?
I think there's a few things which are common between farm animals as well as animal testing. That both of them happen behind thick walls. But you very rarely know what's happening until you have a whistleblower. There's no way you can actually figure out that there's a beagle that's being tested on one particular lab. As in, just the information system is so much so lacking, because most of these places, for example, if they're government run, are probably prohibited areas, they're covered by the Official Secrets Act. You just can't even get into these places. They want to rescue the animals out of these places. And many times, even if these people were doing an offense under the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, and if you trespassed into them, that you would be punished more than what they will be punished for, because just the fact of entering into these premises would be such a big offense rather than what they are doing there. So I think that's the challenge. As in, with regard to animal experimentation or be it farm animals, and more so in animal experimentation, are we able to set up information systems in which people are giving you information as to, like, it's as simple as this, and that's what we will see in the problems that they are giving out. Like, how do I know what's happening? Somebody is working somewhere. Are you able to, as organizations, set up tip lines, set up anonymous tip lines, where then people are able to call and say, आज मेरे ऑफिस में 15 बीगल आए हैं, पता नहीं क्यों आए हैं. एयरपोर्ट में पता नहीं, मैं एयरपोर्ट पे काम करता हूँ, I'm working in the airport and I see this consignment of 500 rabbits that have come from China. I don't know why the hell they have come. Can you think about it? Can you know something about it? And I do think that as effective animal protectors for experimental animals, it is worthwhile to set up those information systems. It's not easy, but then over a period of time, if you put in conscious time and effort, you can.
Looking at it from something much smaller, like, I mean, it's illegal to even these fortune tellers on the road, tell it with the patent and stuff. If I'm not wrong, it's illegal and it's a functional offense by that protection. So, but you cannot punish them. Like, the law isn't able to punish something, an act which is that small.
The law can punish them. It's just that the process of punishment is very dangerous. It's not that the law cannot punish them. For example, if you see a parakeet fortune teller, of course, way outside the limit of what we are speaking, but then I would have to answer the question. Like a parakeet fortune teller, two absolutely strong laws being violated. One, the Wildlife Protection Act. The parakeet is a protected animal in the Wildlife Protection Act. Just the fact that he has these animals in his possession without a valid certificate from the Chief Conservator of Forest is an offence under the Wildlife Protection Act. Second, the performing animal rules. The act of these birds walking in, picking a card and going back is a violation of the performing animal rule. The challenge really that comes, and I think there is an absolutely lovely parallel session that's happening now, is that how do you work with law enforcers? What do you do with law enforcers? How do you build a relationship with them so that when you do see such offenses happening, that you're able to get them to act upon? Of course, it's not easy, but then it is definitely a challenging exercise to build these relations. For example, Don has fabulous relations with the police, and so he's able to do a lot more things, but then he wouldn't do it if he didn't have that particular. It's not easy, definitely not easy.
Because most of the time, cops don't really help us. It's like we usually have to force them to do what we want.
Right. And if you can imagine that in a transport of a truck with 30 cows in them, and if the cops don't want to help, they are not going to come and break into a lab for 35 mice. You know what I mean? So it's just a process, and I think that's the reason why we need to be innovative and use more and more legislation, use more and more regulations, so that you're able to make it just difficult for people to break the law, and that's the whole idea. So coming back to this, the Prevention of Protected Animals Act, it's a central act. So this is something that's applicable throughout the territory of India. It's not just applicable in one part, applicable throughout the territory of India. Because it's a central act, the rules that have been framed under the act are again enforced throughout the India until it's specified that it's not applicable in a particular state. Section 11 talks about various forms of cruelties where animals are involved. So, for example, if you generally look at Section 11, you say if any person beats, kicks, overrides, confines in such a way to cause an animal, and I think the most operative word in that particular section is unnecessary pain and suffering. Of course, it's impossible to deal with an animal without causing a bit of pain and suffering, as in even your companion animal that you have in your house, there's some amount of pain and suffering that is involved. It's impossible to interact sometimes with an animal where there is no pain and suffering, but I think the operative word really is that what is necessary pain and suffering and what is unnecessary pain and suffering. And the whole idea of the Committee for the Purpose of Control and Supervision of Experimentation of Animals, referring to as CPCSA, is to make an assessment as to what is necessary and what is unnecessary, so that anything that is unnecessary can be done. So, RTI works fabulously. Let me give you a classic example of RTI and how it works with lab animals. I was once filing a case against the Veer Mata Jijabai Udyan, that's the Bombay Zoo, for illegally catching and keeping monkeys. So basically what would happen is that monkeys would come and invade into somebody's house, and they would call the municipal corporation or a monkey catcher. They would catch these monkeys, and these monkeys would never be rehabilitated. They would be dumped into the Bombay Zoo. So we filed into the RTI saying that, where did you get all of these monkeys and what are you doing with all of these monkeys? We then realized that the Bombay Zoo was happily shipping off these monkeys to a reproductive health research institute in Bombay, FIAPO. So they were just shipping them off. So they said, oh, we got these monkeys, our monkey catching team went and caught them, they came to the Bombay Zoo, then we shipped them off to FIAPO. So we got that information theoretically through RTI and we weren't even looking for that information. We were looking for some other information as to what is the Bombay Zoo doing with all the monkeys that it gets. We were wanting to establish the fact that they are not rehabilitating, right? But then we realized that they were actually shipping it off for animal experimentation. Immediately, all we had to do was send a letter to the CPCSA, send a legal notice to NIRH, and you will see here I say that any person who conducts an experimentation can only source an animal from a registered breeder who is registered with the CPCSA. Obviously, the Veer Mata Jijabai Zoo was not a registered breeder. They were catching these wild animals. So even though they were the government, just the fact that they were catching these animals tantamount to different thing. So we were able to press charges of hunting on Veer Mata Jijabai. We were able to pressurize NIRH, and NIRH was forced to send these monkeys back without further. So RTI works fabulously well as long as you know what you're looking for and you know what you're asking. And I think most importantly, and as we go through this and once you will see in the questions as well, is that you need to understand what data we will need. Because many times it's not obvious in front of you. As in, like for example, municipal corporations are catching dogs. They are suspiciously sending these dogs off to a veterinary college. The veterinary college has no ABC program, but some dogs are just being sent out to the veterinary college. That's all the information that we have. And that's where the tool of RTI would come. So I would file an RTI to inspect corporation, where are you catching the dogs and why are you catching the dogs? Is it as per the ABC rules? Then they will say, oh, well, we send these dogs away to the veterinary college. They will say, why is the veterinary college requiring these dogs? You probably realize that the veterinary college requires these dogs because they are experimenting on these dogs. Then you could say that the municipal corporation is not a registered supplier. You can't be taking animals from the municipal corporation and conducting experiments. So I think as and when the problem comes, the developing attitude of looking for the data that you want, so that you're able to use that data to get what you want and try and see are you able to fit in one of these regulations and be creative, and that's going to be a challenge. And I think those 6 questions that you will work on will probably give you an insight as to what you should be thinking about. So coming back to the BCA Act and what it talks about animal experimentation, in section, as I said, there's a total chapter in the BCA Act which particularly talks about prevention of protected lab animals, and there it establishes something called as the CPCSA. CPCSA is the Committee for the Purpose of Control and Supervision of Experimentation of Animals. So as to the one Shirani said very well, sadly, you can do experimentation on animals. There's no law that says that you can't experiment on animals. But then what you do is that you control and supervise the experimentation. And the idea of controlling and supervision derives its legitimacy from the word unnecessary pain and suffering. Because you should not be giving unnecessary pain and suffering to an animal. So how do I not give unnecessary pain and suffering? If I'm able to control and supervise an experiment, then the chances are that I'm not giving unnecessary pain and suffering. So that's how the CPCSA concept exists. It's the Committee for the Purpose of Control and Supervision of Experimentation of Animals. Again, this body is extremely important because, and you will see further, because it could have representation from people like you and me. For example, I sit on many CPCSA committees and it gives you a great power to speak up for lab animals. So it's very important to know that there is this government body called CPCSA. Now, what's CPCSA as in, is it just some committee which will say, "Acha tum ye mat karo so that labs will not do, are they bound to follow it?" It's again important when you read the Act. The CPCSA is not an advisory committee. For example, if you look at the PCA Act, the Animal Welfare Board of India is an advisory committee to the government of India. It's not a statutory committee. So basically, what the Animal Welfare Board of India can do is write a letter and advise the government of India, don't do this. Now, once I advise you, it's left to you whether you want to take it or not. Don't go to party. That's an advice. Now, whether you take that particular party, go to party or not is not there. Whereas, if I have a statutory committee like a parent and say you're not going, if you're going, you don't give your pocket money, the chances are that you're not going to do it. So that's a whole difference between the Animal Welfare Board of India and the CPCSA. The CPCSA is a statutory committee, so they have the powers, and any rules that is framed by them is binding on these institutions. So that's very important because they have the ability to make the rules. Of course, they have to follow the due process of making the rule making the rule, writing it, putting it off public comments, getting the comments from the public, then publish it in the Gazette. They have to follow everything, but then they have the rule making ability, which makes them a very unique but a very, very powerful body in comparison to the Animal Welfare Board of India. So what does it basically say? It basically says this, that any institution who breeds an animal or who conducts an experimentation on animals has to register themselves with CPCSA. So you are breeding an animal to say, okay, I am breeding to supply to a lab to do experiments to test in my own lab. So I am just registered myself as an animal tester. Is that alright? That's not alright. If an institution is a breeder of animals as well as even for an in-house purpose, they need to be registered both as a breeder as well as in-house purpose. And there are multiple legislation, multiple rules as to how the breeding should take care, what kind of species can be bred, what cannot be bred, how do you ensure that there is no inbreeding, especially in rabbits and other rodents, because inbreeding is very, very common. There are again very, very exhaustive regulations that the CPCSA has given, and the institutions have to do. Then again, institutions can only source animals from registered breeders. And this is very, very important, especially if you have a veterinary school in your city of your birth. Because the chances are very, very high that the veterinary schools many, many times just source animals from the veterinary bodies. They don't source animals from registered breeders.
And do we have laws which prevent from animal testing in colleges?
Animal
Testing in colleges?
That's what she covered.
So my question is, in case we know colleges that we still do that, is there something we can do about it?
So it depends on what kind of colleges are doing. For example, let's say if you have the pharmacy, it's a D Pharma Institute. A D Pharma Institute is just dissecting a rat. You can of course do a lot of this, because you can then go ahead and talk to the Pharmacy Council of India. You can immediately write a control saying that you recognize this particular institution. You in a letter basically said that you don't have to you change your syllabus saying that you don't have to dissect on animals. However, Radha Chandbari Pharmacy College in Lower Parel continues to dissect animals. And the Pharmacy Council of India recognizes and recognizes the pharma institutions. So they have the power to give a dictate saying, what you are doing is wrong, you can't do it. Similarly, the University Grants Commission, because the University Grants Commission recognizes all your bachelor's course, BSc Zoology, anything that is bachelor rate is controlled, or even master's is controlled by the University Grants Commission. So if you find that there is a particular university that continues to test on something that the University Grants Commission said that you should not be doing, or for something where the Ministry of Environment asked the University Grants Commission saying that you should not be allowing this to happen, then you can immediately write to the MOEF, you can immediately write to the University Grants Commission and say what this university is doing is wrong. Many a times the chancellor of the university is always the governor of the particular state. You can take a petition to the governor and say, hey, you are the chancellor of this university. This is a notification from the central government. This is what it says. The university, which is under your administrative control, seems to be dissecting animals in contravention of India's own animal protection law. The chances are very high that the chancellor or the vice chancellor will take action. So, what is the role of CPCSA? So, the role is CPCSA again, and I can't emphasize more saying that it's basically they should not be subjected to unnecessary pain and suffering. Again, unnecessary, necessary is very, very subjective. So there are 5 tests which you use to say what is necessary and what is unnecessary. So I will further use to figure out what is necessary and unnecessary. So animals are not subject to unnecessary pain and suffering. And this is second, implement duplicate research. So I know that injecting X particular chemical on rats gives this particular research. It's something that I have done. My results are published in peer-reviewed journals. Then you suddenly realize, oh, let me find out if I take the same chemical and inject it to another rat in Mumbai, what would happen? It's the same result. So it's very, very important that it's repetitive research. So research for the sake of research is not allowed. So So anything that is repetitive, anything that seems like it's duplicate is not allowed by CBCSA. Again, animals are kept in pathogen free to ensure proper data collection, because most of the times what happens is that the animal houses are maintained in such bad conditions. These guys go ahead and use these animals, the data that the results that come out don't match, then they go back to start doing testing, and these animals basically end up being sacrificial in many sense. So that's something that they do. And again, animals are procured from registered breeders. Experiments on large animals are avoided wherever possible. So you basically, again, you can ethically agree or disagree, saying that, how do you maintain sapience of animals? As in, is a cockroach less sapient than a cow? But then basically what they say is that as the size of the animal goes higher, the sapience increases. So they say as much as possible use lower species of animals. So if you can't use a rat, then don't use a rabbit. If you can't use a rabbit, then don't use a beagle. If you can't use a beagle, don't use a giraffe. You know what I mean? So that's basically what they say. So this is the overall role of the CBCSA. So what happens is that what happens when you apply? So I'm running a lab, and I decide that I need to do some animal experimentation. So what do? So I go to the CBCSA and say, hey, listen, this is my application process, my fee is attached here, and I want to start testing on animals. So immediately what the CBCSA will ask you is to constitute an institutional animal ethics committee. So basically what happens is that this is an ethics committee which has a lot of people in them, have representatives from the industry, have representatives from academia, and then the CBCSA to this institutional animal ethics committee nominates 3 people. One is what they call as scientific nominees. So these are people who have scientific background and who care about animals. So they nominate them as a CBCSA scientific nominee. Other than this, they also nominate somebody called as a linked nominee, which basically means that if this nominee is too busy doing something or he cannot attend a meeting, then the linked nominee can go in. Then you also have something called as socially aware nominees. And this is where you and me can be involved. Each one of us can write to the CBCSA and say, I care about animals, I am socially aware, and I want to be socially aware nominee. So there is no difference in the power, as in you get equal voting rights in the institutional animal ethics committee. You get to see the protocols and you decide what is okay and what is not okay. You get to see the animal house just like this. These people see the scientific soundness because you don't know whether it is repetitive or not repetitive. You don't know whether you can reduce the number by 5. You don't know whether you need a dog or you don't need a dog. Whereas, but you are socially aware. You know that whether this should be done or not done, whether it is okay to be done or not done. So here again, there is a huge scope for animal activists like you and me to be involved as socially aware nominees of the CBCSA. What does the CBCSA do? So what does the IASC do? So going back to the process, I am a lab. I want to set up an experiment. I constitute an institutional animal ethics committee. Once I constitute the institutional animal ethics committee, CBCSA say, "Chalo, aap ban jao. You become the socially aware nominee. You become the scientific nominee." So now I need to test or I need to do something. So what I do is I call for a meeting. Say, okay, I am calling for a meeting of the institutional animal ethics committee, and here is the protocols that I want to test. What does the IASC do? It doesn't blindly say, oh, okay, you want to do this experiment, go ahead and do it. The IASC examines every protocol or when it's conducted. It ensures that all the CBCSA guidelines that I've been talking about are actually followed. It ensures that they are sourcing animals from the right source. They are actually holding the animals in right conditions. They also inspect animal house. They can also do surprise inspections. But then how are they guided? They're guided by the 4 R's. So basically, they try to reduce the number of animals that are used. They try to replace one animal from the other, sometimes from higher sapiens to lower sapiens, sometimes from one animal to an animal to a non-animal. The third, they refine. For example, can I just ask you to give anesthesia before you dissect, before you cut open? So they try to refine the process so that unnecessary pain. And many times you have animals who will be abused and they are perfectly okay. They don't need to be euthanized. So they will ensure and they will ask that these animals be rehabilitated. Again, the 4 R's, reduce the number, replace, and I think here again is very important. Many times, animal shelters get telephone calls from labs saying that I have 500 rabbits with me, I don't know what the hell to do, you're welcome to take. But with the introduction of 4R, it's very, very important that the IASC, when it sits down for the meeting, and if it decides that there are 400 rabbits that are going to be rehabilitated, they need to make sure that in the project budget itself, that the money for rehabilitation is included. The responsibility of the institution does not end at the point of doing the experimentation. The institution of the experimentation of the organization extends to rehabilitation, and I think this is a humongous look forward, because many times, especially with monkeys and other wild animals, because euthanizing them is a very big issue, so they would experiment on these animals, and these animals would just lay in this dungeonish warehouses for their entire life. But here, there's a provision for rehabilitation. These people are responsible to rehabilitate. Again, a huge scope for animal activists. If you are running a shelter, if you are running a wildlife rescue rehabilitation center, maybe you could run a rehabilitation center for these animals. Like Shirani is trying to help home 28 beagles who are now being rehabilitated from a lab. Something that you can definitely do and ensure. Of course, this should not come as a financial burden to your organization, because the funds have to be allocated by the companies to do it. Now, again, these 5 principles that were formulated very, very quickly, it's very simple. First, it says that animal experimentation should be carried out for the purpose of advancement of basically saying that it needs to be beneficial to someone. If it's not beneficial to anyone, then you better not do the experiment. This is something that was Shirani was saying in the morning, as Mama was saying this morning, is that when you're doing an experimentation, the Institutional Animal Ethics Committee holds the documents and says, what is the benefit of this experiment? What is the benefit of this research? If there is no benefit of this particular research, and if it's just being done because, well, I have the time to do it, I have the money to do it, then it's not allowed, because it has to fulfill one of these criteria, and then only an IAC gives its permissions. Now, the deal is that cosmetics is regulated. So, what you're doing is that the IASC does not have the power to say what is necessary or not necessary, because the law is requiring you to do something. The minute the law requires you to do something, it could absolutely be unnecessary, but then you have to do it because the law requires you. So in terms of cosmetics, what it basically says is that if you are using these 30,000 odd ingredients or whatever that the data already says, and if you're doing a mixture of one of these two creating, then you don't need to test on animals. You have an option to test on animals, but it's not prohibited. So if I do decide to say, no, I need to test on animals, then it's not unnecessary, because I am doing it for a regulatory purpose. A government of India's regulator is asking me to do this testing and give that particular report to him before I can sell off the lipstick. So that doesn't fall within the idea of that, because it's regulatory testing. So anything that a law requires you to do is not unnecessary. Even though in many sense, so what you do is then, while you're lobbying to change this, you go back and say, hey, this is what you're requiring is causing unnecessary suffering, and you need to get the law to be changed. Sadly, the IASC cannot change because of the regulator, because the hierarchy is that the regulator is higher, so as in they cannot override a government of India's certification that require a particular testing to be done.
So HIV drug
HIV drug would definitely fall within this. So if somebody is doing an experimentation on monkeys to develop efficacy of some particular drug which might possibly cure HIV, the IAC will be forced to okay, because it falls within one of these.
But one second, tell me, how do we go about it? Supposing if I go to a company like Johnson & Johnson, which I heard earlier, and a big test, but then we are dealing with these big people, scientists and all that. How do we make them understand? I mean, we are lay people.
So I think the first thing I would do is for example, if you're Johnson & Johnson and their big heart wall, is that what they do? Heart wall, right?
Yes.
They take the walls of the hearts and then they do some sort of experiment. Johnson & Johnson. So what I would immediately do is that either go on the CPCCA's website, and it's very poorly managed website. If you don't find that information on CPCCA's website, through a Right to Information Act request, find out who is the CPCCA nominee, who is the CPCCA scientific nominee, link nominee, as well as the social development nominee. Then, under the Right to Information Act, I have the right to ask the CPCCA saying that was this particular experiment approved, and especially if it's a big the institutional animal ethics company does not have powers to pass on approve large animals. It can only approve experiments for small animals. For anything that is large animals, it needs to be referred to the earlier there used to be something called as a large animal subcommittee. Then they kind of scrapped the whole idea of large animal subcommittee. So if it's a larger animal, then it needs to be sent off to the CPCCA, the main CPCCA. So all of those deliberations are public documents, and it's accessible under the Right to Information. And as a matter of fact, the CPCCA is required by the fair governance and reporting regulations to put up minutes of each of those meetings on the website, and they do put up minutes of each of those meetings. Even though it's very hard to find, if you go on that website and spend some time, you can actually get minutes of every single CPCCA meeting that has ever happened. So you can exactly find out what was the deliberation that did take place. Was this little experiment come at all? So is Johnson and Johnson doing something without informing the CPCCA? If it is, then it's straight off an offense. However, we figure out that Johnson and Johnson has taken permission from the CPCCA. CPCCA has said that when you go ahead and take out this model, this thing, sadly with the given legal system that we have, there's nothing. Within the legal framework that we have. And then of course you can wear an activist hat and say, Chalo, why are they doing this? Am I able to find a non-animal alternative? And that's the job that Alokparna is doing. So at one point of time we realized that all this is legal. Phosphoric testing is legal. Testing of pesticides is legal. There's nothing illegal about it. The proposals come, the drug controller or the pesticide board is saying, "Aapko ye test karna hai." So test karna hai. It's illegal. What the hell do I do? At that particular point of time, then I say, no point dealing with the CPCCA, can I go to the pesticide board and tell the pesticide board, this animal ki zarurat nahi hai. Either you have an alternate animals that you can use, can you just use that? And I think that's when you would shift on to a second gear of activism, where you're changing the regulation itself, you're changing the requirement that they're doing. But sometimes with CPCCA, your hands are tied, because if you realize that they have got the permission and everything that they are doing falls within the larger framework, it is really sad. But most of the time, there's a rule. Most of the time, I think that's the whole idea of finding money. You take 1, 2, 3, 4. Things are up there, how is source? If you're sourcing it off like a slaughterhouse in Vietnam, that's not possible. You have a registered pig breeder. Does the pig breeder actually fulfill all the conditions of breeding that the CPCA says fulfill? Where is he getting his genes from? What is he doing to ensure that there is no inbreeding amongst these two things? So then you go to that level. Transportation. So there's a transport, the CPCCA has transport guidelines. So if the pig breeder is in Lucknow, how is he bringing the pig all the way to Lower Parel or wherever Johnson & Johnson's office is to do this testing? So then you start using multiple legislations that you have to try and catch. But there is, as Gauri is an expert in that, there's always a right? There's always a So the principle number of 2, that there has to be minimum number of animals and there has to be least degree of sapience. Whenever I've given out this slide, there has always been an ethical debate on what is the degree of sapience. And I think without getting into the technical debate as to whether the degree of sapience of a rat is lesser than the degree of sapience of eagle, I would just feel that what it basically says is that in the general perception of things, whatever is the least lower degree of sapience, but then you must be able to convince the IAC that there is a 95% chance that what you are doing is actually going to work. If I say I have an andaz that if I do this is going to work, then the IAC can say, sorry, you need to come back with a stronger figure. And that's where the scientific nominee of the CPCA comes into picture, because even we don't have that. We can try our best to do it, but we're not going to do that. So the idea is that can the scientific nominee use his mind do some research, do some scholarly research or peer-reviewed literature that's available, and see whether it's possible to reduce, whether this is actually valid, not valid, whether the data size is actually valid at all. And multiple times, and anybody who has sat in any animal ethics or any ethics committee figure out that the research's proposals are poor, as in the data size is wrong, the sample size is wrong, they don't have proper controls, they don't do things, and then you realize that this research is not even worth the cost of paper that it's being printed on. And then that's when you decide and say, well, this is not happening, you need to go back, tighten your proposal up and come back to us. And that's something that the IAC can very easily do. And with regard to large animals, the CPCCA can very easily do. Again, minimize the pain and suffering when avoidance is not possible. Should be a research priority. Again, for example, live clipping of animals when they are dissecting. So something is very, very common. So they will just take cardboard pins, like the cardboard pins, and they will live with animals while they're dissecting. Whereas now it says that, are you able to anesthetize these animals? Are you able to give them carbon dioxide gas? So when you're dissecting, they're not really alive. For example, euthanasia. Earlier there used to be times when they would take a rat and just break its neck and throw it away. Now you have euthanasia protocols. It says that you can only euthanize an animal. Again, minimizing the pain is something very, very important. And this is where the 4R concept of rehabilitation, the researchers have a moral responsibility of it. It's not anything more. It's a moral responsibility that if you are abusing a particular creature, you are liable to ensure that you are taking care of that particular thing. And I said, aftercare and rehabilitation cost has to be given. This is the whole idea of 4R of rehabilitation that has come into play. The last and absolute simple condition is that living condition. So let's say I have a monkey and I need a particular serum. I take the particular serum, so I'm not injecting anything out of the monkey. I'm just extracting something. So I've got the monkey, I've kept it in quarantine, I have it in my lab, I have taken all the blood samples, plasma samples, or whatever that I've taken. This monkey is very healthy. So there's no need to euthanize this monkey. So what you do is that you need to pay for the aftercare of this monkey. So your experimentation is over. So you've gotten your sample, you've done your biopsy, gotten your liver piece and you want it. So you're done with it. So but the monkey doesn't necessarily have to euthanize. So who has to pay for the after cost? Earlier what the labs will do is that, अच्छा आप animal activist हो, आपको इतना जानवर को रखना है, you take all the animal and keep it. And this was something that the labs would very easily say. But now it says that if the ethics committee or the CPCCA feels that the animal that is used for experimentation is not going to be euthanized at the end of the experimentation or is not going to die at the end of the experimentation, then the cost of rehabilitating and the cost of aftercare should be paid with them. And again, the cost has to be in correlation with safety and the animals and all of this.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Purpose of this this question, rehabilitation, what does that actually mean?
Sorry, Kevin?
Rehabilitation, in the case you just gave, the example you just gave of the monkey, and is perfectly healthy, what does rehabilitation actually mean?
There again, and I think I'm dealing with that in another slide, is that's governed by the Central Zoo. So the Central Zoo Authority is constituted under the Wildlife Protection Act, and they take care of all wild animals, and any rehabilitation of a wild animal needs to happen as per a rehabilitation protocol, sometimes approved by IUCN, sometimes not approved, it depends per species to species, but then the Central Zoo Authority recognizes centers as rescue and rehabilitation centers. They say that, you are a wild animal rescue and rehabilitation center. So if I'm catching a monkey from a madani, that's monkey dancers, or if I'm catching a snake from a snake charmer, or if I'm catching parakeet fortune tellers, and that can only be rehabilitated in the rescue and rehabilitation centers that have been authorized by the Central Zoo Authority to be rehab centers. There again is to ensure that the species are left back to natural habitat, there are no interbreeding, there's proper quarantine. Like, for example, the Sanjay Gandhi National Park in Bombay. Animal activists who catch monkeys from Madanis, just take them to Sanjay Gandhi National Park and just dump. They just release them. The whole chances were that these monkeys were in close contact with human beings. Peer-reviewed research shows that when monkeys are in such close contact with human beings, the chances of them suffering with tuberculosis is really, really high. And if you take these monkeys and dump them into such a national park where they can interact with very important wild animals, you're putting the entire national park at risk. So they said you have to follow the protocol of rescue and rehabilitation, and that's approved by the Central Zoo Authority, which is again a statutory body which is set up under the Wildlife Protection Act.
Can the rehabilitated animal again subject to some other experiment?
No. A rehabilitated animal cannot be
They become normal.
It cannot be subjected to that because once you rehabilitate them, it's no more with a breeder. It's no more with somebody who is, the whole idea of rehabilitation is because if I need to subject an animal back onto exploitation, I need to be sourcing it from a particular thing. So, but I do know many institutions, because they don't want to go through this whole process, they end up just keeping these animals forever. They just don't send them out. They say that some research is running. When you really look at it, there is really research is something. For example, the All India Institute of Medical Sciences is a classic example of that. They had monkeys kept in small cages for years. They didn't absolutely know test because they didn't have any ground to do practical research. But they just kept there because the cost of rehabilitation was very high. They didn't know what to do. And they were getting tenders to get by food. You had lab animal attendants. You wanted the whole system to be running because you have so many people to pay for. You said, infrastructure, what the hell do I do? I don't want to bring down the infrastructure. Let's keep the animals. It's not going to bring us money anyways. You know what I mean? So, and then, but there, when they were willing to give the monkeys away, we couldn't find a rescue center that was authorized by the Central Zoo Authority. Because it's fine, there are only that many rescue centers for wildlife that are authorized. And then when you have lab animals, it adds another level of complexities when it comes to rehabilitation. Especially with primates, it becomes even more difficult.
When we talk about experimentation over here, in case a person is experimenting a monkey, he takes the liver, and the monkey still is able to survive, but it is inflicting too much of pain.
If it is,
is it like the decision whether they euthanize the monkey or not is up to the person?
In the IAC decides it, and if it's a monkey, the CPCSA decides it. If it's a monkey, the person
actually experiments.
So the experiment team will basically say that this is what I have done. So what he basically has to prove is that this is why this monkey cannot be rehabilitated. I have injected HIV into this monkey. There's no way I can take it out. I can either stop this monkey for the rest of my life or I can put it down. And at that particular point of time, the CPCC takes an informed decision to end the misery of the particular animal. But then if there is a chance to rehabilitate, the animal should always be rehabilitated. If there is no chance to rehabilitate, then the animal should be rehabilitated. So, again, depends on the kind of test, whether it is invasive or not, whether you are actually injecting something, or whether you are just collecting samples, what kind of test that you will do. Now that you've done all of this, now you realize that there's this one lab, and there's this one lab house attendant who goes every day for the thrill of it, takes a monkey. He just takes a cage of a monkey for the thrill of it. He just likes to pull the monkey's tail for the thrill of it. He likes to pick up the rabbit and probably take for this thrill. Are you just going to stab him with the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act for 50 rupees? Probably not. And that's when you can actually get creative and use the subconscious of IPC, because all that the PCA Act says is that if the experimentation is valid and is approved by IAC or CPCCA, then the provisions of the PCA Act is not applicable because it's allowed as per now. But once he has broken the CPCCA or the PCA Act, he is exposing himself for all other risks because he just didn't have to see it. So immediately use 4.8 and 4.9 because he's doing mischief. Many times you find the lab attendants, people who work in the lab, do mischief. They maim them. And anything that happens. So basically, if somebody is doing a mischief of killing or maiming, mischief of killing, or maybe above value 4 to 8 or 4 to 9, you can always use 2, 8, 9 because negligent contact with respect to an animal. So if I am running a lab and I keep a monkey in a cage or a rabbit in a cage, and if the rabbit has maggots in it, it is negligent contact with respect to an animal. Go ahead and use 4 to 8. Go ahead, 2, 8, 9. Go ahead and use 4 to 8. Go ahead and use 4 to 9. Because once the shield or the parda of CBCSE and doing experimentation is removed, you are exposing yourself for any of these provisions. So one should always use, because there's stronger provisions. So it's better to use IPC, better to use WLPA, not just stick with. If it's a wild animal like frog, if it's a wild animal like snakes, monkeys, Scoloris, Lentilloris, any primate species, all of which were used for experimentation, then you can definitely use the Wildlife Protection Act. It's much stronger. You can also use this. Again, here, the Wildlife Protection Act is applicable to almost all except Jammu and Kashmir. But in Jammu and Kashmir, it has its own Wildlife Protection Act, which is almost similar to our own Wildlife Protection Act. It's just that it's not applicable, but then that's fine. Again, hunting of any scheduled animal is prohibited. And it's very interesting, the definition of the word hunting under the Wildlife Protection Act. It doesn't mean you need to take a gun and shoot. It doesn't mean that you need to have a bow and arrow in fur. Even if you do anything with an intent to capture an animal, it's hunting. Even if you do something which with an intent to destroy a nest of a wild animal, it's hunting. It's a very, very, very tightly worded thing. If anybody who includes capture and trapping of a wild animal, it's hunting. So, if the municipal corporation is getting calls saying that हमारे यहाँ बंदर ज़्यादा है, and they use a trap, they catch the particular monkey and for no good reason send it off to a medical college for research, then the municipal corporation can be charged with hunting. The medical college can be charged for abetting hunting. Way stronger charges than the prevention of animals charges. Way stronger. Again, as I said, schedule 1, 2, 3 and 4 different species are protected. As is here, 50 rupees here, a short money for the PC Act. Add on the PC Act and a topic to it. You know, to say, it's basically it's Wildlife Protection Act, but then he also was to it. So put it on as a topic to it, but your major charges has to be the Wildlife Protection Act. So school dissections, Wildlife Protection Act. So as I said, monkeys, frogs, the permission of the Wildlife Department. But then earlier in the Wildlife Protection Act, the Forest Department and the Chief Conservator of Forest, or the Principal Chief Conservator of Forest, Chief Wildlife Warden, depending on state to state, has the power to give you permission to use an animal for experimentation. It's not like there's a ballpark ban. He does have a permission. Again, use Right to Information Act. If you know that somebody is doing, ask your Chief Wildlife Warden that you give them permission. If yes, for what specific reason? Why did you give? And there again, under the Wildlife Protection Act, you have certain reasons only when you can give permission and when you cannot give permission. So again, read through all of this. And this again, and the reason I put this is because I don't know how many of you run shelters, but then it's very, very important that any wild animal rehabilitation center needs to be recognized as a central zoo authority. And if you go ahead and rehabilitate a wild animal without being recognized as a CZA, then you are committing an offense under the Wildlife Protection Act. You can be charged the same offense that you are charged. The Wildlife Protection Act is a double-edged sword. Please use it cautiously. But then, if you do intend to rehabilitate an animal, ensure that you are recognized by the central zoo authority. Other than this, you have other things like, for example, Convention on International Trade of Endangered Species. So, if somebody is having a lemur and it's not found in India, it's not protected by the Wildlife Protection Act, you immediately ask for science certificate because it's protected by the scientists. If somebody is using some exotic variety of parrot to figure out bird flu, then you immediately figure out that, did you get scientists permission to get this animal in, or did you just fly to Bangkok and buy it off night market? So that's something that you definitely need to do. DGFT, the Director General of Foreign Trade, has multiple notifications as to what can be brought in, what cannot be brought in.
There are these birds called hawks and you also need a science certificate or how
it depends on whether they are wild caught or whether they are inbred, whether they are bred within the country or not bred within the country.
What is your bred? inside we need
then they don't
register.
They were like, and there again, you need to have something called a sourcing document. If it's a scientist product animal has to come where you got that particular
Somebody is
article.
reading the articles here that does he or she have a register?
You need to figure out from where you got the parents now.
And the reader need not be registered.
As in, if he's not selling for experimentation, he doesn't. He doesn't have. If he has not selling for, if he's selling it for experimentation, he has to be registered. Okay. So EGFP has multiple notifications. Then you also have quarantine laws. So when you're bringing a dog, bringing a cat, you have multiple quarantine regulations that you have. The best thing is that make friends in the quarantine department because they get every single animal that comes in for whatever will pass through the quarantine department. Make friends with them. They can act as fabulous whistleblowers and let you know there are many airline policies. Many airlines around the world nowadays don't fly animals for experimentation purpose. This includes Jet Airways to Cathay Pacific. If you have keep looking at airline policies, many a times they will mask saying that this is a pet, but then the papers will say it's a pet. But when it comes, but the address will be of a lab. But then they will get immediately catch and say, well, this did not come in with the purpose of breeding. So it points to issue of unification because if it did come in with a purpose of breeding, there's one particular import duty, there's one particular customs duty that you need to pay. If you imported it as a pet and use it for experimentation, immediately you have done this wrong with animals. So again, just being very, very creative when the problem comes and as to how you do this. So a very quick multi-sectoral, multi-aspect on animal experimentation, just to see how we can use other legislations creatively. What Alok has really done is that she's culled out some hypothetical situations. So what we did is that you have to divide yourself into a group of 3 versus a group of 3 each, and you will get 5 questions each. Pick one question yourself, so you will give the complete choice, and then you will have to figure out what is wrong, whom are you going to contact, what you are going to do, and how you are going to stop or not stop, or is there anything wrong in it or not at all. So, and then one person from each of your team will come and present, and then others can comment as to what you have done. Does that sound good? Okay, 3 in each. And if you want any questions for me, I can come
The first problem is, it is necessary for experiment in your schools.
Okay. If your neighbor child comes back from school excitedly and tells you that his class is sick with a frog today. Okay, go ahead. Tell us what you use.
Actually, this who is the legal authority towards this school person doing the experiment in our school. Suppose in the school, this who is the authority? This experiment actually ये जो डिसीजन करना है इस कॉर्पोरेटिव स्कूल को हम प्रैक्टिकली किया है तो स्कूल ने उनको फ्रॉड वाले को बोल दिया है अपन टीचर ने कम से कम फ्रॉड नहीं है और फ्रॉड वाले के लिए बोला है ये बोला है कि स्कूल में बच्चे ने फ्रॉड को काटा और वो मुझे चिल्ला के आगे बोल रहा है अंकल अंकल मास्टर वाले स्कूल में हमने फ्रॉड को डिसेक्ट किया तभी आप क्या बच्चे को पहले आलोचना किया तो अभी मैडम ने सिखाया तो मैडम इसका सब नहीं किया आपने सीखा है लेकिन वो सही तरह से सीखा है आपने प्रॉपर कैसे दूध दिया है और डिग्री किया है नहीं किया तो बच्चे को उनके माइंड के बाहर ही है बच्चों का माइंड बच्चे के माइंड के बाहर ही है लेकिन माइंड के बाहर है उसको एक एनिमल का जानवर है माइंड के बाहर है उसको ये बोला उसको बच्चे को तो कुछ नहीं बोल सकते तो जिसने डिसीजन करवाया है एटलीस्ट उधर जाके उसको क्या बोला उसको अवेयरनेस कर सकते बिल्कुल सो साइंस टीचर ने डिसीजन लिया था तो आप साइंस टीचर को क्या शायद जैसे को मैं तो मेरे ख्याल से तो पावर प्रेजेंटेशन बना सकते हैं बाकी कुछ ऐसा अल्टरनेटिव सोर्स ऑफ यूज कर सकते हैं तो सेम थिंग आप विदाउट डिसीजन करके आप उसको टीच कर सकते हैं
सो डिसेक्शन इज वेरी सिंपल कानून में बहुत क्लियर लिखा गया है कि डिसेक्शन आप नहीं कर पाओगे ऑल्टरनेटिव्स है कंप्यूटर फ्रॉग है कंप्यूटर रैट है बहुत से ऑल्टरनेटिव्स है आप स्कूल में जाके ये बताएंगे कि आप ये जानते इस्तेमाल ना करें इस्तेमाल करना कानूनी गलत है क्योंकि फ्रॉग है तो वन्यजीवी संरक्षण अधिनियम में भी वो भी लागू होता है तो आप वन्यजीवी को इस्तेमाल नहीं कर पाओगे अगर आपने कोई वन्यजीवी को इस्तेमाल किया तो आप जेल में जाओगे उससे बेहतर है आप सीधे इस्तेमाल
जो चेन सिस्टम है वो चेन सिस्टम ऐसा डैमेज होता है उसके बाद टीचर को थोड़ा अवेयरनेस करेंगे
So very simple. If you know somebody is doing a dissection, it is prohibited under the law to do dissection. Many times it is. Many times the school teachers just do it because the textbook prescribes it. The textbook is prescribing it, then you can immediately write to. Because the problem with ICSE and CBSE is that they don't have their own textbooks. Any publisher can come out as long as they fall within the larger framework of these particular syllabus. In state syllabus, it's not like that because the Department of Public Instruction of every state actually brings out the textbook which is used by everyone. In ICSE and CBSE, that is not the case. Maybe this is one-off textbook who is still happening. Then maybe I would figure out that once a सरस्वती publication की biology book में कहा गया है कि dissection करें, immediately हम ICSE को लिखेंगे, CBSE को लिखेंगे, depending on where it is, and tell them that de-recognize this book because they are not following the guidelines. Go to school, give them an alternative, computer frog, computer chicken, whatever is required so that they will do alternatives for animals. Is that clear? Yes. Okay. So second T. Sorry.
This is a example which we say for the second thing for the people who have done and the generic. And from that we have derived the two things.
Okay. And do you know which problem she's talking about? Which problem she's talking about? No, what are you talking about? क्लास में ध्यान देना चाहिए.
This is an example, live example for the vehicles which had come at the Chennai airport. And on that basis, we have put in our things.
It's actually worksheet number 2.
Yeah, that's what we are.
Now the first thing to ask for is that whether the dogs have come from licensed breeder. Because even if it's not being sold for an experiment or whatever, dogs still need to come from licensed breeders. So that's the first thing to know. And where it's going. Is the purpose certified as pets or whatever, but is the purpose certified? That's the second thing to figure out. And all this can be done at the airport because the dog will be at the airport. What do you think about
At least a month. And the people who were the airline which brought them or the person who brought them, do they have the authority You have brought them to upper stage or things like that. Proper identification of that particular person.
Basically, even the protocols regarding transport to and from the airport have to be fulfilled. What kind of cages and whatever that can be figured out. Moreover, if the animals, it has been established that the animals have come to be taken to a certain laboratory or a certain pharmacy college or something, then the first thing to alert is the CPCSA, perhaps like Jayasimha has just mentioned, check the website if this certain college has got any research approved on this certain number of beagles. The number of beagles also matter. Dogs, generally the dogs that are experimented on are beagles. The numbers also matter because sometimes the IAC or the CPCSA approves a certain number of animals, but the college asks for more in case there are casualties and stuff like that. So that shouldn't be allowed. But that, and then a whole lot of grassroots advocacy, I don't think in this case would be required because you don't have to convince people that this is bad. The people doing it know very well what they're doing. Anyway, the kind of media advocacy I feel should be that you try and shake the credibility. Once you establish that there are loopholes, shake the credibility of the college, the pharmacy college or the medical college or whatever, by saying that if they can't follow rules themselves, how can they come up with credible research results or whatever? If their methods are wrong, how can the results be good?
So they should be alerted so that they can come in and try and understand what this is all about and maybe expose these people.
Okay.
Who have been brought you into your state as a parent? What are your data in each situation? First of all, we need to check whether that dog has a registered badge because every country has a state of badge system. And we need to check the badge system is there, the dog is related to the owner and going to the owner, the documentation is related to the owner, transportation documents. And airlines facilities are there, there's airlines policies are there. They always consign to the delivery order. So who's the delivery order person then is executed. And secondly, there are certificates to be taken out. Destination food address very much required. You can easily check it out there for every community. Third, do you need to maintain collations? Yes.
Who would be your relation?
Sorry?
Who would be your relation partners?
I think
Sorry? So if you would maintain coalition in this problem, who would be those partners?
sorry?
No, I'm just thinking. Maybe the AIDA, the International Air Transporters Association. Yeah, I think you can actually check it because they bring out the regulation. I think it's a fabulous example. The airline did bring it, and as she very clearly said, the AITA guidelines require for you to have a bill, it requires you to have a consignment number, everything. And if there was anything that was being done, then you can immediately write to the International Air Transport Association because they give out, so you can take you are able to bring the coalition.
Not clear the consignment. There's a discrepancy in the documentation. What they said in notice, there's any discrepancy they will not give that particular consignment to the airline.
Okay.
And then what is the kind of media advocacy that we require? Yes, we need because sometimes it happens that हम consignment बनाते हैं किसी नाम से और जैसे हम नहीं होते इससे हम उस कस्टम्स जो चेक्स होते हैं उन रेंडम चेक्स होते हैं उनके ऊपर भी मीडिया एडवोकेसी की जरूरत है हमें हम उसके द्वारा उस मीडिया एडवोकेसी के द्वारा उस रेंडम चेक को प्रॉपरली चेक करा सकते हैं क्योंकि क्या होता है जिस पेपर
house it. Yeah. So what we initially want to do is file for an RTI, find out what exactly what is the history of the monkeys kept there and what's going on. Yes. And then once we find something fishy, or if once our rumors are validated that they just being kept there and the experimentation is done long back, they just been housed there because the company or the lab does not want to rehabilitate them. That's when we approach the CPCAC.
And we want to find out as to what exactly the committee's standing is on the particular issue, and then go into the source of the monkeys and see,
from where they were sourced and things like that, and all the guidelines that CPCA validates.
Experiment in the first place was validated and said given an okay signal for CPCA, and then the next thing would.
And if you ask us whether we need coalitions, I think that it will definitely be a yes.
Yes.
Because once we have validated, then we know that something is wrong. We probably probably if I'm associated with an NGO, which I am, so probably my NGO stand along with somebody who's in the legal front, with them. CPCAC again is
statutory body, because it's a statutory body and it can actually do something and not really advise the government to do something about it, but actually take a strong stance on the issue and go ahead and if it has to take legal, support the petitioners with any legal decisions.
And with grassroots advocacy, I think it would be necessary
because it's not. Like Jayasimha already told us, this is not something that's happening explicitly. Simply because it's happening, everything is happening behind the doors and nobody actually knows what's happening. First of all, to begin with sourcing this kind of information, and then to actually let people know about the kind of products they are using. Like the same analogy that we're using with cosmetics, to tell people to not use cosmetics which are being tested on animals, the same thing, so that we can stop these steps, to reduce at least the kind of testing and like maintaining these animals in these experimental house. And then the next one would be, what is the kind of media advocacy you require? We're talking about all sorts of media, visual media, and audio, and then personally, like talking to people or awareness drives or whatever. And we also thought, the idea of having some kind of public interest applications, which would mean that everybody is personally getting involved in whatever's happening, so that public interest applications.
Because having monkeys for 10 years, and we getting to know after 10 years, we are getting to know that monkeys are being housed there. So I think it is better that we bring it out and tell people that this company has been talking about monkeys for such a long time and things like that. So that's pretty much.
Okay,
Sheet number 4. It's about we have a suspicion that the municipal corporation of the city is catching the dogs and supplying to the laboratory. So, what the data we need to collect for this? We can apply for the RTI and we can ask to it that whether the municipal corporation is collecting the dogs or not and where they are supplying. If we find that they are supplying for some laboratory testing, so as Jayasimha said in the presentation, we can check it on the CPCAC website and other methods that whether the municipal corporation is registered with the Zoo Authority of India or not. And of course, they are not registered. Then the Zoo Authority that's the keys.
Zoo Authority only for finance.
Then we can ask, we can check the CPCA rules, and we can file a complaint with the AWBI whether the ABC rules are followed or not. And through RTI, we can ask, and then we can go for as the media advocacy is concerned, then we can publish those results in the media, and then process and timeline that dogs we can charge in 5 seconds.
Well, perfect. Thank you so much. I hope this gave you a larger picture of what the Humane Society as well as FIAPO is doing, and how on a very, very macro level and also on a micro level giving an understanding as to what you can do at your size Don't forget to give a missed call. Please get more and more people to give a missed call to start off with. In the conference itself, mention that each one have to get 5 other people to give a missed call. Other than that, thank you so much. Give us positive feedback. As in, you like it, what you like it, so that the next time when we are here to present, we can only get better. I've got some housekeeping announcement to make. The next session actually starts in 4 minutes, so you have to basically get your coffee and quickly go. There's this fabulous dinner that's being arranged as well, so please don't miss the dinner. I know it's Goa and it's tempting.